Okay, so you ready to dive into something kind of sticky?
Yeah, lay it on me.
Okay, so like, have you ever kind of maybe not wanted someone to succeed, and they're
Big.
like crushing it and
Oh, yeah, I think we've all had those thoughts. Not our proudest moments, but definitely human.
exactly. And today we're going deep on that whole phenomenon.
Yeah.
Like, what's the psychology behind it?
Right, right. And what does it say about us as individuals, as a society, even?
Totally. We're calling this deep dive hoping for the successful to fail. We've got some fascinating sources lined up, all sorts of perspectives on this, shall we say, uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah, and it gets pretty deep. I mean, we're talking envy, resentment, even this primal fear of power
Ooh,
dynamics.
proper dynamics. Okay, so let's start there. I mean, we all know comparison can be a trap.
Oh, absolutely. But,
Yeah.
but it goes way back. Some of our anthropological research suggests that this aversion to, like, people rising above the rest might be an evolutionary thing.
Wait, really? Like from caveman days?
Think about it. Back then, if you hoarded resources or, acted like a big shot,
You might get kicked out of the tribe. Makes sense, actually.
survival of the most humble, I guess you could say.
So that instinct, that fear of someone getting too powerful, it's like still in our DNA.
It seems that way. And our modern world, with its emphasis on status and achievement, it kind of amplifies those feelings.
And then you add social media into the mix.
Oh, don't even get me started. That's a whole other deep dive right there. The curated lives, the highlight reels. It's like a breeding ground for comparison and, yeah, resentment.
So is it always like straight up envy, though? Or is there ever like a weird sense of, I don't know, justice? Like if someone's success feels unearned, maybe even built on shady stuff.
That's a great point, and a lot of the research backs that up. The feeling of schadenfreude, that pleasure we get from someone else's misfortune.
Schadenfreude, love that word.
It seems to be strongest when we perceive unfairness, like the cheater who finally gets caught or, the bully who gets their comeuppance.
So it's less about wanting them to fail and more about wanting the scales to balance, like wanting things to feel fair again.
Exactly. Our brains are wired for fairness. When things feel out of whack, we seek equilibrium, even if it means someone else has to take a tumble.
But then there's that whole other side of it, the projection. What is that exactly?
So imagine you're struggling with something. Maybe you feel insecure about your own abilities. Instead of dealing with those feelings head on, you might project them onto a successful person.
Hmm. So you're kind of like hoping their failure will somehow validate your own struggles.
Right. It's almost like saying, well, if they can fail, maybe it's not so bad that I'm struggling too.
Oh, wow. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've got this like mix of envy, a need for fairness, and then this tendency to project our own insecurities onto others. That's a lot to unpack, but it's mostly on an individual level, right? What happens when this hoping for failure thing scales up, like at a societal level?
Well, that's where things get really interesting and potentially dangerous.
Dangerous how?
Think about it. If success is consistently met with negativity, with this underlying expectation of failure, it creates a really toxic environment.
Yeah, it's like, why even try if you're just going to get torn down?
Exactly. And that's how you end up stifling ambition, innovation, the whole shebang.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
Yeah.
We create a culture where success is punished, and then we wonder why people aren't aiming higher. Like, have you ever heard of that tall poppy syndrome?
Oh, yeah. Like how the tallest poppies in a field are often the first to get cut down. It's a powerful analogy for this whole phenomenon.
It really is. Okay, so we've talked about the psychology, the societal impacts,
Mm.
but there's another big piece we haven't really touched on yet, the ethics of it all.
Right, and there's a very important distinction to make here. It's one thing to hold someone accountable for their actions, especially if they've done something unethical or harmful.
Right, holding people accountable is important.
Absolutely. But it's a totally different thing to wish for someone's downfall just because you're envious or resentful.
Like, it's not really our place to decide who deserves success and who doesn't, right?
And our sources also remind us that failure, especially at a larger scale, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Think about a company going bankrupt. It's not just about the CEO or the executive.
It's the employees who lose their jobs, the families who are impacted, the ripple effects go on and on.
Exactly. So we have to be mindful of that bigger picture. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've explored the dark side, the whys and hows of hoping for this successful to fail. But I'm curious, what does a healthier approach look like?
Right. How do we shift this narrative?
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that keeps coming up in our sources is the idea of reframing our thinking.
Instead of seeing successful people as threats, what if we saw them as sources of inspiration?
Yeah, like what can we learn from their journeys, their strategies, their resilience?
Exactly. It's about turning envy into curiosity, resentment into a thirst for knowledge.
And instead of focusing on what we lack, can we cultivate a sense of gratitude for what we do have?
That's such an important point. Gratitude is like an antidote to envy. It shifts our focus from what we're missing to what we're already blessed with.
It's like instead of tearing others down, we can focus on building ourselves up,
Exactly. And imagine if we could create a culture where we genuinely celebrate each other's successes, big and small.
where we're not waiting for people to fail, but actively supporting each other's growth.
That's the kind of world I want to live in, a world where everyone feels empowered to thrive.
Okay, so to wrap up this deep dive, it seems like hoping for the successful to fail, it's complicated. It's part of human nature, but that doesn't mean we're stuck with it.
By understanding the psychology behind it, the impact it has, and most importantly, how to shift our perspective, we can choose a different path.
We can create a more supportive, more inspiring world for everyone. So to our listeners, I'll leave you with this question. How can each of us contribute to a world where success is celebrated, not feared?
And where we all have the chance to reach our full potential.
Food for thought, for sure. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring.